Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Silva, and I'm the President and CEO of the KCK Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to all of you members. Thank you for staying engaged with us. And I think we have a number of non-members, and I want to welcome you all to this Women's Chamber Network event. There you go. We're very excited about today's presentation. I did want to let you all know that we do offer chamber membership for companies. If your company is currently not a member or is considering membership, but you want to get involved with our Women's Chamber Network, you can sign up at an individual rate of $75. So that is something that is available to you all to join this women's division. Quick history on this, we could not be prouder of the fact of collaborating with the former KCK Women's Chamber. It is our honor to do programming on behalf of women in business, whether it's the small business owner, the VP or the CEO of a large firm, the mid-manager or the young professional. I think our Women's Chamber Network Committee and Program Committee has done an outstanding job of planning events for women in business. And we do look forward to getting together in person really soon, hopefully sooner than later. And so again, very excited to have you all here. I saw the sponsor list up briefly. Thank you to our sponsors, Design Mechanical, Bank of America, Kansas Gas, BNSF, and I might have missed one or two, but again, we're extremely proud of our partnership, not just with our corporate folks, but with the KCK Women's Chamber Network. This is a great thing for us, and we look forward to continue to putting out great programming for our folks. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Tammy Bartunik, who will introduce our speaker. Nicole, great to have you. Have a great event. Tammy?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Appreciate that. Hi, everybody. It's Tammy. I think most of you have we've had a chance to meet, but good to see everybody today. I'd like to introduce you to Nicole Bianchi. She is the founding partner at Bravership HD, where she is a professional speaker, facilitator, and ICF executive coach, facilitating team alignment, leadership, and culture building workshops. Before Bravership, she was a human resources and organizational development executive, leading transformation within the ConAgra brands, as well as Malco Insurance. If you're wondering, does she have a passion outside of trying to help folks improve their organizations? Yes, it is bravery. And her focus is enabling leaders to stretch into their bravest selves. She has an upcoming book, which I pre-ordered months ago. I can't wait to get it in my hands. Her book is Small Brave Moves. Learn why little acts of bravery are the key to life-changing leadership. This book explores the intersection of where bravery and leadership meet, and will be released May 10th, coming up very soon by New Degrees Press. The readers will discover how small, brave moves made often will compound over time, creating a competitive advantage, both in life and in business. With a foundation of bravery, leaders can intentionally craft a thriving culture of bravery for them, as well as for others. You're gonna love this book. Can't wait to get it again. Small Brave Moves. It speaks to emerging first-time and experienced leaders who want to lead in a new way. You'll be inspired and transformed into hopefully a much braver version of yourself by taking one brave move at a time. And when Nicole is not speaking or writing or leading a workshop, she loves to cheer on her kids in their pursuits, as well as she likes to plan adventures with her family. And she enjoys, I think, like perhaps a lot of us, a full-bodied wine with her friends. So Nicole, I'm going to kick it over to you, and the floor is yours. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Bartunik, and thank you for having me, the Kansas Chamber. So you're going to get a little sneak peek of what's in the book today, and I'm going to share a little bit of a teaser to get you interested in learning a little bit more. So there I was being interviewed for a new leadership role, and it was my first C-suite executive role. And in that interview, I was told, Nicole, if you are not able to fix this, we are going to outsource the entire thing. So think about that for a minute. Outsource the entire department. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, wow, seriously? Like, it was a big challenge, but I was definitely up for it. And you know what else is risky and a bit of a challenge is getting braces later on in life. Thanks to those, I have great teeth, but more on that soon. So fast forward about a month later, I'm sitting with the CEO over lunch. It's a fancy lunch down at a steakhouse. We're both enjoying salads. And they clear the plates, and for about an hour, I'm reviewing my 90-day plan with the CEO. So at the end of it, the CEO tells me, great job, Nicole. This is exactly what we need. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, okay, because remember, it's risky, right? I'm not sure about this. And I decide we high five each other, we head back to our offices. And as I'm walking back to my office, I'm greeting everybody in my team and the cubes heading up to my office, and I'm checking in. So Vice President of Sales, how is that recruitment going? Good. Your son's Little League Championship game, did we win? Yes, okay. And I get back into my office and I sit down and I hear the loudest noise, ping, that sound when you've got that instant message coming through your computer. And all of a sudden I read, Nicole, you might want to go check your braces. I think you have something in them. Now, I have no mirrors in my office at this time, nor do I right now. And so I run down as fast as I can to the bathroom and I square up in front of that large mirror and I look. And not only do I have a piece of lettuce, but what I actually have in my brace is something that has now covered the entire front bracket of my teeth and my braces. It was a large leaf of lettuce. And you know that beautiful green salad I had at lunch? It is now dark green and really disgusting. I sit there and I replay the last events in my mind. And I'm going, okay, first thing, lunch, right? That's what got me into this mess. Talked for 45 minutes, sharing my 90-day plan. Wait a minute. The CEO sat there for 45 to 60 minutes watching this across my face. How could he have done that? And why didn't he say anything? I mean, nothing, nada, zilch. And I thought to myself, okay, well, he's not necessarily polite either. I mean, he did tell me he would outsource this if I wasn't able to fix it and turn it around. And I think to myself, okay, as leaders, we are constantly challenged with tough conversations. And I have a choice at this point in time. Do I say something or do I let it go? Now, then I stop and I realize maybe, just maybe, it's going to require me to be brave for the CEO to be brave, to consider being brave. So I want to talk bravery isms with you here. I'm going to throw up a quick slide for you. Let's talk bravery isms. So the expectation is we're that big brave, right? With the cape coming in to save the day. But not all moments require us to be that big brave. And to be honest, not everybody is ready for that big brave. So we protect ourselves with a cape or a mask, and we're not our best selves. We're actually hiding, we're playing it safe. And that's just not good enough. And in the work I do with my clients, if I were to boil all of their challenges down to one common element, it's bravery or lack thereof. Just like my CEO not being able to tell me about something so silly as lettuce in my braces. Some think either you're born with bravery or you're not. And that's just not true. Bravery is actually an acquired behavior, and it takes practice. So when we're working hard at mastering a skill or a tool or a sport or even a musical instrument, I mean, anything we want to try, it takes practice, right? Bravery takes practice, and it takes small moves for us to get there. Leadership development has been primarily focused on acquiring tools like coaching, feedback, presentation skills, and those are important, but it's not enough. And so a couple of years ago, I thought, what if we shift the spotlight from just leading to become a braver version of ourselves? Hence Bravership. I believe blending bravery with our leadership role, skills, and tools creates a competitive advantage for leaders, and it takes small, brave moves to get there. And I do believe that leaders who live a life of Bravership, a braver version of themselves, can grow influence, they can accomplish more, and actually fear less often. So what gets in the way of us living this braver version life of ourselves? It's actually fear. So the truth is, we've been taught not to be brave, and we allow fear to get in the way. So there's actually two types of fear. The first fear is the inherent one that it's intuitive, it's linked to survival, like a snake, right? A snake that has come to bite me. What do I know about the situation? It could be poisonous and I could die from it, right? That's inherent fear. The other fear is a learned fear. And that is irrational and actually develops over time. But wait, these can be relearned, right? And we have to be aware of what those are for us and how we relearn those. And so we're going to explore actually 3 of those today. And they're the top 3 that I see in the leaders across Fortune 10, 100, 500 companies that I work with. These are the 3 that I want to mention and just explore a little bit with you today. So the first one is the fear of not being perfect, not good enough, not having it right. So I want you to give me a thumbs up on your screen if you have ever experienced not feeling perfect, right? Not good enough, not having it right. Yes. So here's the deal. The imposter syndrome was actually coined by Clance and Imes in 1978. And it's a psychological pattern in which we doubt our own accomplishments. We second guess what we've already done. It's a persistent, internalized fear of being exposed, right, as a fraud, like we may not have this. And research shows that it actually impacts men and women equally. Isn't that crazy? So, imposter syndrome. I want to share with you a few people that have experienced this. So look at this, Sheryl Sandberg, who is the COO of Facebook. She has 2 best-selling books. She's ranked 5th out of 50 of the most powerful women in business by Fortune magazine. She deals with imposter syndrome frequently, she says. The next one, Tom Hanks, actor, filmmaker, 5th highest grossing actor in North America. And then the third person, that's right, me. So yours truly fights imposter syndrome all of the time. I deal with it regularly. I wanted to start my own business several years ago and talked off and on about it for a couple of years. Fear of not being perfect or not good enough was getting in my way. On top of my own negative self-talk, I was told by other leaders that I would go have coffee with or spend time with, looking for encouragement, ideas, things like that. They would tell me, oh, that will never work. You won't be successful. I tried that. Oh, consulting, that's what you do between jobs, Nicole. That's not what you really do for a career. I mean, I was crushed. And then one day I had a colleague say to me, okay, Nicole, why wouldn't you start this business that you've been talking about? This person knew I wasn't happy in my role. And I sat there and I shrugged my shoulders. I don't know. They said, Nicole, what is the worst that could happen? And I say, well, I fail. I'm not successful. I just don't get it right. I don't have it figured out. that person said to me, "Could you find another job if this didn't work out, Nicole?" I said, "Well, yeah, absolutely I could. I could find something comparable." And they paused and they trusted silence and they said, "So what's your next move?" And I was like, the emotions running through my body, a tremendous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. That conversation was life-changing, being able to talk through something that I was fearing, and not just talk through it, being nudged and pushed to go ahead and pursue what that is. That's one example of how we can overcome imposter syndrome. So a couple of other ways to think about, and things that we might want to experiment or play around with if this is going on for us, is one, we have to focus on the facts. What are our achievements, right? List them out objectively. What have we done? If you're like me, most often I only remember the last 2, 3, 4 months, maybe the last year or two. But if you add it all up together, we have all done some pretty amazing things. We tend to forget that. The second thing I want you to think about is I want you to challenge your limiting beliefs. These are the stories we tell ourselves. So the reason why I wasn't starting my business was I didn't have the perfect business plan. I didn't have this, I didn't have that. When in reality, it ended up pushing me to see from what was so much bigger and happening around me. Limiting beliefs keep us from seeing what there is to the world. Think about it like looking through a little peephole in the door, right? In our door. And when we're looking through that peephole, the scope is limited and we can't see all there is to see. If we were to look through life through a peephole 24/7, how much would we miss? So limiting beliefs act like that peephole, and they keep us from seeing what is possible for ourselves. Maybe you think, well, gosh, I can't, or I'm too scared, or I don't know enough, or I'm not skilled enough, like I don't have every certification or whatever it is to be ready for it. You have to think about, what are you willing to give yourself permission to do? To acknowledge your strengths, right? And even the additional things that you might need to acquire. Again, that list is important. So raise your hand for me if you have seen the movie Tag. Tag is that movie where and it's based on a true story, which is what I love about it. And they're best friends and they've played tag for years and years and years, all the way into adulthood. It is such a fun movie. But there's a great example in this movie where Bob Callahan, who's the chief executive officer, is getting ready to walk into a big meeting with the Wall Street Journal. And you can see he is nervous. And he's walking into that meeting and he says to himself out loud, "Okay, all right, Bob, you are the CEO of a Fortune 800 company. You've commanded the respect of co-owners, co-workers, and vendors alike. And that is why you're being interviewed with the big boys, the Wall Street Journal." It is such a great example of an affirmation statement or something we need to tell ourselves, right? To battle that inner critic, that imposter syndrome that heads our way. And it's a great way. And it's a great example of also somebody who, looks like they have it all together, yet they're battling it, right? So you can also talk about it, say it out loud as a third way to kind of overcome that imposter syndrome. Sharing your feelings with trusted colleagues, friends, or even an executive coach to help put this in perspective and to help you reinforce those changes and shifts that you want to make. One move forward, one small brave move. And at the beginning of every workshop or speaking engagement, I actually have my own mantra. I have kind of a routine that I go through. And one piece of that routine that I learned to be really, really beneficial for me is a mantra that I had created. And for some reason, for me, it gets my butterflies in formation and it helps me center and just take a deep breath and lessen the risk that I'm putting on top of it. And it goes like this. I know what I know. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here. And I care about you. That's it. It's simple, It centers me, it gets my butterflies, all my nerves and formation. And I'm like, okay, I know what I know. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here. And I care about you. Let's do this. Anyone can create their own words, right? In their heads to calm that fear. It doesn't need to be fancy or have some special, saying. It just needs to be something that you can use for focus and confidence. So that's about the imposter syndrome. The second fear is fear of loss. Leaders deal with this fear of loss. It's either losing a loved one, losing an important job, an important client. And this can be really, really tough for us. So fear of loss can show up in so many different ways. Fear of loss can stop us dead in our tracks. Fear of loss can stop us from being brave. And I'll tell you, I feared losing my dad. He was diagnosed with esophageal cancer abruptly one day. We had no notice and we were ill-equipped for the journey. I didn't face my fear in that moment. In fact, we pretended everything was okay, and it wasn't. And we did that for 6 months until we said goodbye to him. But just years later, I got a second chance at dealing with this. And it was cancer again, but this time it was actually my mom. She was diagnosed with late stage 4 lung cancer, which had metastasized to her bones. There was no cure, and doctors had given her 2 months. And I'll tell you what, I wasn't going to screw up again. So what did I do? I put on my cape, and as the brave daughter, as I thought was bravery, off to advocate and fight for her. And I'll tell you, 2 months turned into 2 years. Much of those 2 years, I was in warrior mode, fighting, advocating every step of the way. And it wasn't until we transitioned her to hospice that it hit me. The fight was over. And actually, the true bravest moments were right in front of me. You see, I had to transition from warrior mode to being an end-of-life caregiver. And for 22 days in hospice, she would be my masterful guide, and I'm the student practicing being brave. One afternoon, she woke up and said, "Nicole, we have to plan my funeral. Grab your pen and paper." And I'm thinking, okay, all right, got my pen and paper, I'm ready to go. She says, church, let's talk about that. Great, check. We talked about the church. Pastor, check. Songs, Bible verses, check. Lame church luncheon, where everyone brings a mismatch of stuff and nothing really goes together, but everyone's throwing elbows and fighting over grandma's famous potato salad. Wait, no, I said. Come on, Mom. You make fun of those lunches. You hate them. So why would we do the same? And she said, what? And I said, well, what if we did something that was going to be different? What if we chose one of your favorite restaurants, and let's say we took everybody to the restaurant after the funeral? And she smiled and said, could we? I mean, is that a possibility? Again, not as if she's going to be there, but breaking some of the things that were happening and the things that we think we automatically have to do, small, brave moves. And I said, okay, so we get through that piece. Next one, eulogy, check. She says to me, you have to be the one to do this. You are the only one. Her statement ended with a period, not a question mark. And in my head, I'm thinking, do you even know how hard it is to have this conversation with you? You and I are planning your funeral. And now this? So after moments of silence, I asked an important request that had been weighing really heavy on my mind. Remember, I didn't get this right with my dad. And I said, I will agree to do the eulogy if you agree I can be there when you take your final breath. She said, you see, I don't think I have much control over that, Nicole. And I said, but I think you might. You see, I didn't want her to protect me as she had my entire life. She knew the final moments would be toughest on our family. And I wanted her to know I would be there with her every step of the way. So 8 days later, I held her as she took her last breath. And as promised, just days later, I delivered a eulogy in honor of her that filled the room with laughter, tears, and pure celebration. It took bravery, not just to go through the motions of caring for her, but to go much deeper. I couldn't let the fear of losing her stop me from being brave. And during one of our final conversations, she told me that she would always be there with me as she held my hand. And I said, well, how would I know? And she said, to look for purple butterflies. Again, those moments are just near and dear to my heart. But I'll tell you, not all losses are this extreme, yet they are always important to us, right? So another fear of loss might be losing a role, losing a client, losing a project, things changing. 1/4 of working Americans believe it's very likely or fairly likely that they will lose their job or be laid off in the next 12 months, according to the recent Gallup poll. A 17% point swing in just 1 year. Not surprising, right? Given the pandemic and everything that's going on. So I'll tell you another story. The story is, let me go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. The story is, it starts off with, we are the Red Bull and their mint julep. Our chief financial officer said, this was the last role I had held inside before starting my business. And he was referencing the merger that we had with First Comp and Markel Insurance Company. And I was the EVP of human resources for this company and ran purchasing facilities in a couple other areas. So I was on the front end of the merger, leading people and culture. The challenge, the acquiring company's human resource department proudly claimed to have systems and processes from the 1980s. So what's the problem, right? I mean, I loved the 80s. But this essentially meant that the merger wasn't going to be about us taking the best of both companies into one. What it meant was I had to begin to unravel everything I'd worked so hard to build over the past 5 years. For example, moving from a sophisticated goal and performance management system to now a Microsoft Word online document. Fear of loss had me holding such a tight grip. And after 12 months of traveling every other week to Richmond, Virginia, and literally hitting my head against a brick wall, someone bravely said to me, you know what, Nicole, you're kind of miserable to be around right now. Now, I'll tell you, they said it with a lot of love and a lot of heart. But that was the wake-up call I needed, right? I didn't realize that here I had been working 60, 70, 80 hours a week at a job I no longer loved. And I didn't realize I had fallen out of sync with that role. Those words were a wake-up call to me and forced me to step back and scan every aspect of my life at that moment. And I had a choice. Either fix the situation or move on. So I want you to think about, is there something that you're holding a tight grip on right now? And if yes, what might it be? Throw it into the chat for me. What's something you might be holding a tight grip onto that you shouldn't be? And so I'll tell you, one strategy in dealing with loss is to make a list of your concerns, right? Make a list of what's happening for you right now. Just 2 weeks ago, I had an opportunity to interview Danielle Kurgan. She's the Chief Transformation Officer at Macy's department stores. Talk about, I mean, retail has been hit hard by this pandemic, right? She was surrounded by pressure and feeling completely alone, and was dealing with fear of loss. Fear of loss because they had furloughed at the beginning of the pandemic about 108,000 employees, and subsequently had to actually reduce their workforce by about 30%. And she was sharing with me that she was feeling so overwhelmed with the complexity. And so she leaned into one important habit, which was writing it out. And she asked herself a series of questions. What's the situation? Wrote it out. What's the worst that could happen if we really screw this up? Wrote it out. How can we take care of others during this, right? Despite this, because of this. And then finally, how do we meet people where they are? Was the last question. And that habit of Making a list of your concerns, writing things out can be a really great way to think about dealing with loss, right? So I want to share with you the final fear. This is the fear of change or moving on, getting outside of our protection zone. So most people prefer the status quo. In fact, 62% of people don't want to leave their comfort zones, their rituals, their habits, things that are most important to them. And so I've been working on a case study looking at bravery over the last couple of years from two perspectives. The first one is bravery in front of us. So what's the bravest thing I could do right now? The second one is bravery behind us. What brave moments have I had recently? Or what's the bravest thing I did today, this week? So I just walked in the door. Let me show the screen real quick again. I had just walked in the door, and I just walked in the door from a business trip, and I was actually coming back from a long business trip, and I was anxious to try out my new questions I had been working on the plane. And as you can imagine, my children end up getting to be a bit of beta testers, whether they like it or not. And I asked Joe, lacrosse player, my son, I asked him, Joe, what's the bravest thing you did today? And I thought I would just test it out. I wasn't sure how this was going to go. And he paused for a minute, and then he said, you know what, Mom? I played goalie at my lacrosse game today. Now, if you know anything about lacrosse, there's face-off, middies, long stick. I don't know all the titles that there are, but face-off is what he plays, which is right at the beginning when you have to fight for the ball. Goalie is the furthest, and face-off are two very different roles, not even close to being the same. So he says to me, Mom, I played goalie at my lacrosse game. Nobody else wanted to do it, and I didn't either. And I'll share with you, only because these were the words of a 16-year-old. He said, Mom, I didn't want to get my nuts racked. That was the reason. And I said, okay. And he said, but I did it for the team. Nobody else wanted to do it, but I knew that if we wanted a chance at winning this game, I had to step up and I had to try it. He said, Mom, this is what I learned. It turns out I'm not a bad goalie. I learned so much from this goalie's point of view. And third, it's so much harder than it looks. He said, that might be the most important position on the field. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, think about that for just a moment. It may not have seemed brave at that moment, right? But reflecting on that small, brave move enabled him to grow a very different perspective, allowed his team to step up in a different way. So I want you to think about, what's the bravest thing you've done today or even this week? And I'd love for you to throw it into the chat. What's one thing the bravest thing you've done today, maybe this week? Remember, small brave moves could be just the simple act of saying yes to something you would have otherwise said no to, or no to something you would have otherwise said yes to as well. So one strategy on the fear of change is to give yourself permission to experiment and practice. Here's what we know. Remember, bravery is an acquired behavior, right? It takes practice. And so if we're nervous about change, what about if we lessen the load a little bit and give ourselves permission to experiment, to try something new? Practicing small, brave moves is actually the compound interest of self-improvement and growing as a leader. The same way that money multiplies through compound interest, the effects of your small, brave moves will multiply as you repeat them, not just for yourself personally, but for the teams that you lead as well. Or if you're not leading a team today, those that you influence, right, cross-functionally across your different, your organization or clients you might even be working with. It will multiply your leadership success, one small brave move at a time. All right, so let's go back to the embarrassing lettuce in the braces saga. Remember, do you say something or do you let it go? So here we are 3 weeks later from that 90-day plan, and I'm meeting with the CEO in another city, yet again at another meal. So it's dinner this time. And before I open the door to that restaurant, I looked at the reflection and I used Brené Brown's mantra, which is don't puff up, don't shrink, just stand your sacred ground. So we were catching up on some funny work-related stories over an appetizer and a drink, and I go in. I started the conversation with, can I share something with you that might be uncomfortable for you? And it definitely is for me. The smile and the lightness of our conversation previously had vanished, and he got real serious, and he said, and he came on in and he said, yeah, Nicole, talk to me. Tell me what's going on. And I started the conversation with, listen, I have to know, when we were going through the 90-day plan, did you happen to notice anything? I couldn't even get the rest of the sentence out of my mouth, and he turns bright red and looks down at the ground. It was time for me to lean into the discomfort and not run from it. I said to him, that must have been really hard to see and not say anything. And I just paused. And he said, Nicole, I'm not good at that stuff, you know, like the whole stain on your shirt. I'm not good at telling people that stuff. And in my head, all I'm hearing is excuses. And I paused and I said, how will I know you will be able to give me honest, just-in-time feedback if you're not able to tell me something as silly as this? He said, you're right. And that evening over dinner, we ended up laying out agreements on how we wanted to work together to be most successful. That small, brave move, which, by the way, I even got physically ill over having this conversation, enabled us to open up a powerful dialogue, shift our relationship to a much deeper level because we were now aligned. He ended up being one of the best leaders I had ever worked for. And it wasn't because he had it all right. It's because we got clear on what needed to happen and I could trust him, right? And that conversation. So we have a choice. Looking back on that situation, I can't imagine not speaking up, what my life would have been like. And I'll tell you, my prediction is I would not have been successful. It would not have ended well. And I would have always thought, can I trust you? But that moment of small bravery ended up transforming so much for me in that role. And that's just one example of a mindset, a behavior, or a habit that we as leaders can have by making those small, brave moves. So it's really a defining moment for you. It's a defining moment for me and all of us. And a moment that I always want you to ask yourself, what's the bravest thing I need to do right now? What's the bravest thing I need to do right now? So my goal for you is I want you to be able to grow influence. I want you to be able to accomplish more and ultimately fear less often. For just one small brave move can make all of the difference in the world. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I think we're going to open it up for some Q&A here. Is that right, Dr. Bartunek?
Yes, that'll be fantastic. We have, I'm going to say maybe about 10 minutes or so in order to keep everybody on time. But let me first ask everyone, when we were listening to your story about the lettuce in your teeth, how many of us are doing this? I did.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it. And I love all of the chats that you guys have been putting in there. It's incredible, the brave moves that you're making today, right now. I'm proud of each and every one of you.
So I think, Caitlin, everyone's able to unmute if they'd like to actually ask a question, or should they drop that into the chat box? What's the best?
Either or you can select the raise hand button. Jessica Kinsey does have her raised hand. So I don't know, Jessica, excellent. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, or you could drop it in the chat box, whatever works for you.
That was an accident. Sorry.
Okay.
Just kidding.
She's just high-fiving us.
Yeah,
She's just giving us
high-fiving. All right. Well, if anyone else just wants to go ahead and speak up, or you can drop it in the chat box, that works.
Nicole, I do have a question. Who do you draw your inspiration from, if anyone? And great speech, by the way.
Thank you. I'll tell you, there are several leaders. I will tell you that that I'm going to kind of give you a top 3 at the moment. This is kind of off the cuff right now, but the top 3 that I interviewed for this book that really just made me take this concept and go so much bigger. I'll tell you, Danielle Kurgan from Macy's, because we went deep on what they had to go through. And it is just, I mean, we both had tears. We both were crying in the middle of this, laughing, talking about the moves she made. Another one is Dan Pink. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Dan Pink. He's the author of Drive. He talks about purpose, autonomy, and self-mastery. He just incredible. And then the third one is Barry Posner is another one. If you guys are familiar with the Leadership Challenge or A Leader's Legacy, he, you know, when I think about the 5 exemplary best practices they talk about, I really challenged him on how bravery didn't show up in any of their books, because they talk about, like, you have to model the way, inspire a shared vision, challenge the process, enable others to act. And then the last one is the heart. Oh, shoot. Give it to me, Karin.
Encourage the heart.
Thank you. I drew a blank and I was like, Karin will help me. Encourage the heart. But to do any of those 5, you have to be able to be willing to make those brave moves, right? To do that. And so being able to have deep conversations with thought leaders who have been doing work for 20 plus years in this space was just incredible. Like, it was, they challenged me, I challenged them, and it really helped me take a lot of my, a lot of the book is about different mindsets, behaviors, and habits that the leaders at their very, very best are doing. And so I'll tell you, those are the ones that come up for me right now. Brené Brown is another. I mean, her research is so incredible, and on vulnerability. And you'll see me reference her a bit in my book around vulnerability and showing up as our authentic self. And so she's just another great one, but I could go on forever. There's so many good ones. Thank you, Jasmine.
Yeah. When does your book come out? Sorry.
It comes out May 10th. And so should we tell him, Dr. Bartunek?
Yes, I think that's a great lead in. Go ahead.
We have purchased a book. The Kansas City Chamber has purchased an autographed copy for each and every one of you as a gift for joining us today. So how incredible is that? Like, that gives me goosebumps that you guys get to be a part of this journey with us, and that you'll, so I'll get the books on or about May 10th. I'll sign them for you, and then I'll send them down to the chamber, and we'll get them dispersed to you shortly after that.
Or Nicole, just visit me. I'll get us some wine and we can go through the book together.
We'll hand deliver them. Yes, that's a great idea. I would love that. I would very much love that. Very much so.
I need to be included.
You always got a room at my house. You know that.
We can make that happen. Nothing would give me more joy than spending some time with some fabulous women leaders who are making a difference out there.
I have a question if nobody else has one at the moment. Is that okay?
Kathy has one.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead and I'll jump in after you if that's all right.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, Kathy. I didn't see you. I'm just wondering, Nicole, with being brave, how does having either no trust or significant amount of trust with that person that you want to talk to, how does that play into having a brave conversation?
Yeah, I'll tell you, you're talking about opposite ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And what I find is when people have so much trust, you know, by that I mean a very close relationship, it is like 10 times or 100 times harder to have that conversation because they think they're putting the relationship at risk. And what they don't realize is by not having the conversation, you're putting the relationship at risk, right? So when I work with teams inside of organizations, teams that have worked together for like 10, 15, 20 years, have grown up in the system together, those are the ones that we have to really get in and break down.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's great to have that amazing trust, but you have to still be able to have the conversations, right, in honor of that relationship. And then conversely, you said on the opposite side, when there is no trust, it's kind of like, how do you build the bridge when you're walking on it, right? How do you have this conversation while you're trying to build trust simultaneously? And what I find by opening up the conversation, I talk a little bit about Kimberly Scott's model, if you're familiar with radical candor, care personally, challenge directly, that if you're able to do it with bravery and grace and let them know that you care about them and that's why you're sharing this, you can build trust simultaneously while you're having this conversation, and you actually, there's stronger credibility, stronger respect as a result. So I have a whole chapter on that very part, Dr. Bartunik. So thanks for sharing that.
Thanks. Kathy, did you have a question?
I actually have several, but I'll just ask one so everybody else has a chance. But first, I have to say, I have also a let us leave story. I was working for a nonprofit organization, meeting with the president and CEO of the largest health foundation in Kansas for the first time. And when I left that meeting, I had a let us leave stuck in my tooth. So you're not alone. It happens to us all. At any rate, a lot of what you talked about today, I think, is that, it's all about overcoming fear, right? We all have fear. We all do. And you also referenced that people are most comfortable in their comfort zone. And I will be completely honest, one of my greatest fears is that I am in a comfort zone and not realize it, because I would be horrified if I was just status quo and not pushing myself. That would be awful for me. And so I think that a lot of people don't realize that they are in their comfort zone, and they really are. Are there any insights that you have on that? How do we identify people who are in their comfort zone and try to understand that a little bit better? More importantly, selfishly, from my perspective, how do I know that I'm in my comfort zone and I'm not pushing myself like I should? Just any insights that you might have.
Yeah. So just real quick, I'll tell you, I spend an entire chapter talking about leaning on your circle and being really intentional about cultivating that circle. And here's why. The two examples I shared with you just in this talk about somebody saying, Nicole, you're miserable to be around. And then the coaching I got on my business were two people in my circle who picked up on something I wasn't seeing, right? And so Kathy, I think, and so I'll ask people regularly, I'll ask them one question. I'll say, what is something you might be seeing that I'm not seeing? What is something you might be seeing that I'm not seeing? And that question opens up so much for me, because that gives them permission to share something with me, right? And it gives them permission to kind of call me on some stuff that I might be comfortable with. My business partner is one, Jeff Shannon. He is fabulous, and he is really good about saying, "Hey, can I give you some straight talk?" And he'll tell me if I'm not being my best at something that I'm not even seeing, right? And so that circle is really, really important. But you have to ask for things from that circle, right, to be able to get what you need. So Kathy, when you're going, gosh, I'm in my comfort zone and I don't even know it, your circle will help you out with it. But you got to be clear and make the ask, or let them know, give them permission to tell you, right? Yeah.
That's great advice, Nicole. You have to have those people that are willing to be brave and tell you things that you may not maybe want to hear, or maybe don't realize you need to hear in that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
We might have time for one final question.
Trudy has her hand.
Okay, Trudy, go ahead.
Oh, Trudy, you're on mute.
Just wanted to look at bravery through another lens, because I think bravery is a muscle that can be built upon. So the more you test yourself, the more you push yourself, life is not about living without fear. It's kind of challenging and managing those fears. So Nicole, any thoughts on how we can be braver in the future?
Yeah, I think you just gave it to us, Trudy. It's that giving yourself permission to practice and experiment, and just saying yes to something that as you feel it inside of you, right? It's like, I'm not really sure I can do this. I'm not really sure, I can. And so when I look at requests or people asking for me to do things or something, I'll tell you, writing this book I can't tell you how many times I wanted to put it down and walk away from it, because who wants another Brené Brown? That was what I was telling myself. Nobody, people are hearing all the great stuff from Brené Brown. And I had several people tell me, you have a different voice, you have a unique voice, and your voice needs to be heard. And then I was like, okay, so I think, experimenting, practicing, and I could go through like the 9 chapters. I chose the 9 things that I think, the 9 moves you should make to be a little bit braver every single day. Leaning on others. And then Trudy, I think another one that I talk about in a chapter is being there for others, that we actually are braver when we show up for others. And pick up on cues and clues that people around us might be talking about as well. That can actually accelerate bravery within us as well. So I feel like I'm all over the place with that answer because it's such a big question, Trudy. It's a good one. It's a powerful one.
Nicole, when you talk about leadership challenge, you remember the research in the beginning of that book, talking about the 4 things that followers want.
Mm-hmm.
I think that helps us know when we're searching for what does brave look like, those things such as inspiring and helping motivate and challenging and looking and being strategic and visionary. I mean, sometimes I think, what does brave look like? I think sometimes it's right in those elements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Mm-hmm. Kathy, did you have one more thing?
Just if you have time, I'm sorry. I know we're at time, but it just occurs to me as I've been listening, and this has been great. So thank you so much. But it seems, I tend to oversimplify 5 things sometimes, but it seems to me that the overall message is that in order to be brave, we have to be authentic to ourselves and to everybody that we are around. But be kind and understanding. And if I'm authentic to myself and don't try to do or be something I'm not, then my hope is that people that I am in touch with know that I'm authentic, mm-hmm. and there's a trust that comes from that. I mean, it's oversimplifying, but is that kind of the root of it? Be authentic to myself and to everyone that I'm around.
So Kathy, I feel like you read chapter 1 of my book, which you guys, no joke. The chapter title is It Starts With You and Your Authentic Self. But then I get into, we can do all those great things, Kathy. And then towards the end, I get into the inertia of culture and environment and the things around us that may not allow us to always be our best self and our most authentic self, right? Because we can't control some of those things around us. And we can do our very, very best. But I'll tell you, I share several examples of companies that bravery is not something you can show up with. They will, it's just not. And I talk about getting politically fired, where you get fired, but you stay. And they don't let you go yet, but it's miserable. And so it's a good one, Kathy. And I do talk a lot about that and also culture and environment. So because that plays an important part as well. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I so deeply appreciate such rich conversation with such an amazing group of women. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. I really appreciate that you found time to come and visit with us today. And we'll be reaching out. We do have the registrations from today. So look for an email from the Chamber ladies when the books are in. And I just want to, again, thank you, Nicole, for being here today. And Kathy, any final words as our chair? Would you like to wrap up?
If I'm going to do it, I listened to the KCUR NPR fundraiser this morning, and they were pitching membership, and I will repeat something they always say: if you like programming like this, please donate. In this case, what I'm asking is become a member. Everybody has different budgets to work within. Being a full chamber member gives you access to all the Women's Chamber Network programs. But if it's just not the right time for that right now, again, you can join the Women's Chamber Network with an individual membership for $75. Go to the chamber website. The information's all there. So anyway, thank you all for being here. And Nicole, thank you. It was an outstanding.
Thank you. It's wonderful to see everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye, ladies. We'll see you next month.